ain't see me, you Stevie. Wondering how I reach more evolutions than Eevee and make it look easy.
What is up, Earth's mightiest subscribers? It's Ernie, the Blerd without fear. Welcome back to the channel. So today's video, we're gonna be talking about
Partly metal, partly real.
that's right, Silverhawks #1. This is the issue that I've been sitting on this one for probably by the time this video comes out. I've been sitting on this for about half a month. And man, it's everything Ed Brisson promised us it would be. He said that this was going to be Untouchables, the Untouchables in space, and he was not kidding. Like, that is honestly, it sounds like a gross oversimplification, but it really isn't. But I'll actually throw in another aspect, another little piece of pop culture history that it also has a little bit more in common with, I think, at least in terms of a commentary in the style that it's delivered in. Are the Silverhawks the Untouchables? 100,000,000%. But I would also go as far as to say there's a lot of RoboCop-isms in this as well. I'm going to try and stay away from spoilers until we get a little later in the video. I am going to just kind of talk in vagaries just for right this second. I just want to go ahead and say, if you are a person who is a fan of the original 80s Silverhawk series, this book is for you. If you're someone who has been constantly asking, man, when are they going to bring back franchises like the Silverhawks? This is the book for you. If you are someone who wanted to see more of the world of Silverhawks, you wanted to know more about how and why the Silverhawks were made. I mean, to be fair, we know why. It all has to do with their villain Monstar escaping from prison. But that is kind of a gross oversimplification in and of itself. Because when you go back to that original first episode of the animated series, which I believe was actually titled The Origins, that episode doesn't really tell us anything about the characters outside of like what they're capable of doing, telling us their names, like little brief introductions. We know enough to know that Quicksilver is the leader. We know that the Copper Kid is from some place called Planet of Mimes, or the Mime Planet, whatever you want to call it. We also know that Steelheart and Stillwill, the brother and sister duo. As a matter of fact, we know that Stillwill is the younger brother. That's the most we know. And we know that Bluegrass has a military background. We don't know too much more about the characters in that first episode than that. And while, yes, there are episodes that kind of dig a little bit deeper, let's be real. The Silverhawks cartoon, as many cartoons back in the 80s, were largely just 22-minute advertisements for toys for kids to buy. Let's just keep it a buck. Was it a great series? Yeah, I thought it was fun. But this, I think, is on the path to become something better. No differently than I think the Thundercats series at Dynamite is already been doing in regards to the original animated series. Don't get me wrong, love the original animated series of the Thundercats. I like the Thundercats 2011 series probably more because it was able to delve more into some things that never really got addressed in the original show. And the Thundercats Dynamite series is doing that in spades. So in this, we're kind of, I mean, once again, it's only the first issue, but we're getting that much more. I'll say this, and then we'll kind of get it over into spoiler territory. The main thing that you really need to know going into this book is that you're going to get to see a little bit more of Stargazer in this. Stargazer is going to be the one who is ultimately putting the team together. We also get to see a small bit of some of the older Silverhawks. And when I say older Silverhawks, one of the things I think sometimes gets lost in translation is that Stargazer was an original Silverhawk, but the program had basically been shut down, but it was only reinstated when Monstar got out of prison. Well, in this issue, what's happening here is that we get to see Stargazer and Condor, a character who came up a little bit later in the original animated series. We get to see them interact with one another, but also get a little bit of a tease of what their lives were like back when they were the Silverhawks, and kind of hints and teases that they're nowhere near as advanced as the Silverhawks that are going to be gracing this comic, as well as, you just go back to the old series. They're letting us know that they're the old models. These are the new models. Not only that, we get to see some of the rest of the original Silverhawks team and get to know why they're not being brought in on this. And I think another really cool thing about this too is we get to spend a good deal of time with the leader of the team, Quicksilver. Though granted, what I love about this issue is that Quicksilver's inclusion here is largely him before he actually becomes Quicksilver, because we spend the majority of this issue following the escape of Monstar. And what's great about this is that in a lot of ways, this is almost beat for beat his escape from the original series. The only difference being that it's not ambiguous, some of the things that are being done here. Like case in point, we get to see Molecular, who was one of the ones responsible for helping him to escape, but also characters like Hardware and so on and so forth. We get to see that Monstar is a much bigger entity than I think new readers would probably want to believe. And I want to say in the original first episode, while yes, we got to see Monstar, we didn't get to see him flex his muscles quite as much. We do get to see a little bit of that in this issue. And I think personally, for one of the coolest looking characters in the history of 80s cartoons, Monstar was a problem, but he also was not so all powerful that he couldn't be taken down. But I mean, he was still no slouch. He just looked really cool. And I like the fact that in this, Ed makes him more of a threat. I feel like the threat of Monstar looms large over this entire issue. Like, I feel like even if you're not familiar with the Silverhawks, you get the impression pretty early on Monstar's not the guy you mess with. And what I think makes this even better is, what's going to bring us over into spoiler territory. Before we get into spoilers, I just want to go ahead and say right now, if this is something that sounds like even remotely something you'd be interested in, go to your local comic shop, your LCS, go to them, talk to the person behind the counter and say, hey, I want this Silverhawk series in my pull box. Not just one issue, the whole thing. Because this, if you're the type of person who wants to see more stuff like this is how you get more comics like this. Every comics publisher, for the most part, especially Marvel and DC, this is Dynamite, but especially Marvel and DC, they look at pre-orders. And when they look at pre-orders, what they're looking at is shops pre-ordering these books to go in your pull box. So if you want to see more stuff like this, like I had a lot of people that were always asking me, oh, Blerd, they're doing, Dynamite's doing the Thundercats. They're now doing the Silverhawks. Are we ever going to get a Thundercats Silverhawks crossover? Are we ever going to see the Tiger Sharks? Are we ever going to see all these other like random and sundry properties show up at Dynamite? Well, this is how you ensure that happens. I saw a lot of people that were really upset that when the Thundercats series had its first spinoff and it was Thundercats Chitara and not Thundercats Panthera. Well, guess what? If you went out and got that Thundercats Chitara series, that is actually going to pay dividends towards you getting that Panther series, that Tigra series, that Wily Cat and Wily Kit series. We're already getting a Thundercats Lost series that's going to be showcasing Bengali, Pumira, and Linkso. So that's what that basically, that's my public service announcement. So go do that if you want to see more Silverhawks. If you want your pull box to be partly metal, partly real, you need to ask the person behind the counter to hook you up. Now, with that said, let's get into spoilers. I mentioned earlier that we spend a good deal of time with Quicksilver before he becomes a Silverhawk. As a matter of fact, the Silverhawks program is not reinstated in this issue until damn near the end of it. Once Monstar has actually gotten out into the wind, we get to spend some time with Quicksilver in his just regular human guise, where he is, for all intents and purposes, he's a space cop doing space cop shit. And it's pretty cool to me because Quicksilver, at this particular point known as Lieutenant John Quick, he kind of reminds me of Murphy from the RoboCop movie. How when you watch RoboCop, you're following the journey of this guy named Alex Murphy. He's a cop. He's a good dude. Like, honestly, it's kind of funny because RoboCop in a lot of ways is propaganda for a lot of different reasons, but it's propaganda, but also kind of anti-propaganda, but in the sense of Alex Murphy, the fact that they're trying to get you to believe that, yeah, this guy is not a problematic cop. This is a guy who's actually just trying to do a good job. He's just trying to do right by the city that he's sworn to serve and protect. And that's kind of what I think John Quick is kind of meant to give off to you. This is a guy who's by the book. He wants to take down the bad guys, and he wants his men to follow the rules. I go back to the Untouchables analogy, something that Ed has been saying a lot about this book, and even said, to me when we spoke in our interview. But the thing I actually love about it, it's not just lip service. There's a point where they're talking, more specifically, John is talking about, taking down this criminal ring who's, throwing around these counterfeit purses and other merchandise. And there's a point where he mentions that, hey, you guys don't start trying to take this stuff into evidence and then keep it for yourselves. This is actually very reminiscent of the beginning of the Untouchables. If you remember that scene, there's a point where Kevin Costner is looking at the police officers who are going to be trying to help him take down Al Capone, and he tells them that, I get it, people drink, but I'm gonna need every last single one of y'all to stay sober when we do this mission. No one is going to be drinking a single drop of alcohol. Because you got to remember, this is back during Prohibition. It had that same type of energy. And I love how, in a lot of ways, you can kind of quickly tell that a lot of the inspiration for Stargazer, while yes, it's the original animated series, but you can also tell that it's Sean Connery's Malone, who is probably a lot of the inspiration for the character. Now, to get to it, I mentioned Alex Murphy. Well, I think anyone who's seen RoboCop even at least one time knows that Alex ain't long for this earth. There's a reason why he's called RoboCop, why he's a cyborg, and it's because he gets killed. Now, in this particular instance, it's not necessarily outwardly stated that he was killed similarly to Alex Murphy, but he was definitely gravely injured enough that his entire body, for the most part, has to be replaced. And that's where we kind of get to this point where, and I wonder if this will be the case, because one of the things I loved about RoboCop was the commentary of, well, am I still human? Am I still a man? And the whole tagline of Silverhawks being the partly metal, partly real. I don't know if Ed is going to lean into that on any level, and I actually spoke with him very recently, and now that I'm saying this out loud, I wish I would have asked him, I wish I would have thought about it, but that's going to be the thing. And it does actually seem like there's going to be at least a taste of that, because when we get to the very end of this issue, John has no memory of what happened to him. At least he doesn't seem to. He is equally as surprised as anyone else would probably be to wake up and have a mostly metallic body. I don't know if this is something that was plotted out by Ed, but one of the callbacks in RoboCop was, hey, do we want to get rid of the arm, the one arm that Murphy had that was actually perfectly viable? And one of the things with Quicksilver in the animated series was that he does have one hand at the very least that is still normal for the most part. But I wonder if there's going to be any gags towards that, because there is definitely a partly metal, partly real gag that comes up in this issue that I thought was really clever. But all in all, fantastic book. I could not love this enough. I think that, yeah, you have to be absolutely just off your meds to be a Silverhawks fan and not be picking this book up. I'm sorry. I'm not trying to shame anybody, but I mean, that's just what I feel like. The whole time I was reading this issue, I kept hearing the theme song, partly metal, partly real. I just kept hearing that the whole time. So yeah, I love this. I love this book. And I think if you're a Silverhawks super fan, you're gonna fucking love it, okay? Even if you're just like a passing Silverhawks fan, you're gonna love it. You're gonna love it. And I think, yeah, that's it.